Okay, so we are discussing finance lease and operating lease per IFRS and US GAAP. So as per the case that is given, you have to make a lease payment of $10,000 every year for 4 years. And the rate that is implicit in the lease is 5%. So the first step will be to find out the present value of all the lease payments, which should ideally be the value of the ROU asset. ROU is right of use, and the lease liability both. Now you can find out the present value of the asset by two formulas. One is the normal formula for present value of annuity, which is annuity value into 1 minus 1 by 1 plus R raised to the power of n divided by R, which tells you it is 35,459.51. The other way you can do is use the PV function. So is equal to PV. Rate will be 5%. The number of years would be 4. The payment would be minus 10,000 because that's a lease payment that we are doing every year. Future value of the loan liability has to be 0. And type also 0 because we are assuming the end of year lease payments. So both by the formula as well as by the PV function, we have got the same result, 35,459.51 as your. So this becomes your ROU asset as well as the lease liability. So I'll make a note here that the ROU asset and the lease liability are both recorded. So अभी जो मैंने आपको text भेजा आप देख सकते हो, they are both recorded at the present value of the lease payments. This is when I send that, this is what I mean, that हमें we have to record this at the present value of the lease payments. Now the first step to do is to construct the loan amortization schedule, for which I will put here year 1, 2, 3, and 4. We will start with the opening balance of the loan. Yes, very good. OBL. Then add the interest, reduce the equated annual installment, and arrive at the closing balance of the loan. Opening balance of the loan we just found out is 35,459.51. The interest that will be charged in the first year will be 5%. The equated annual installment will be again 10,000. And the closing balance of the loan will be opening plus interest minus EAI. This becomes your opening balance of the loan for the next year. Now again you pay interest of 5%. EAI remains at 10,000. Closing again is the same, opening plus interest minus EAI. And when I repeat this exercise for all the 4 years, I should get, what should happen logically? My loan value should become 0, which is what happens here. So this part here, this is your loan amortization schedule. This one. This is your loan amortization schedule. अभी हमने सिर्फ एक पार्ट किया. We have now this schedule will be nothing but ये आपकी लीज लायबिलिटी इसी तरीके से दिखेगी बैलेंस शीट पे. So you will see कि हर साल you will start with 35, then report 27, then 18, then 9, and then finally 0. Clear? So that's how you are going to report it. Now, what about the asset? Asset also needs to be depreciated, right? So for that, we need an asset schedule also. For the asset schedule, again, we will have year gross block, depreciation for the year, accumulated depreciation, and finally net block. And this also we will need to make for 4 years. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, gross block, as I said, ROU asset also has to be the same present value of the lease payments, which is 35,459.51. Now, here we are assuming straight line method of depreciation. So, pehle year it will be this by 4. Accumulated will remain same, and gross will be gross minus accumulated will become your net. Now, gross block never changes, वो same ही रहता है. What changes is your depreciation. So, इसमें this has to be the same. Accumulated will be previous plus add. Yes. तो ये आपके depreciation हो गया. And net block is simply that. So it becomes 0 at the end of the 4th year. Now this schedule, what you saw now is your this is the ROU asset schedule. ये बन गया आपका ROU asset schedule. Now, if you look at how it will be reported under IFRS, this is something which I wanted to show you. ये देखो. So this part here that you see, this is your finance lease and this is your operating lease. ये फाइनेंस लीज का स्केड्यूल है, ROU एसेट और लीज लायबिलिटी का, और ये ऑपरेटिंग लीज का स्केड्यूल है फॉर ROU एसेट एंड लीज लायबिलिटी. But for IFRS नहीं, now we are talking about US GAAP. For IFRS, it's the same treatment for finance and operating. So we are not worried about that. We are now talking about US GAAP where finance lease and operating lease will have a different treatment. तो फाइनेंस लीज का ट्रीटमेंट इन यूएस गैप इज एग्जैक्टली द सेम एज इट इज इन आईएफआरएस. तो इसीलिए देखो आप, मैंने वही के वही एसेट आरओयू एसेट की वैल्यूज ली है. एट द एंड ऑफ ईयर 1 26,594, एंड ऑफ ईयर 2 17,729, end of year 3 8864, and finally we arrive at 0 value. This is for finance lease as per US GAAP. Now, operating lease as per US GAAP, the liability values will be the same what you are showing here. Exactly the same. So 27,232, 18,594, 9,523. यही values यहाँ पे भी आए हैं. But the problem is ROU asset. Now what happens is ROU asset also you show the same values what you are showing in the lease liability. मतलब ROU एसेट भी मैं ऐसे ही दिखाऊंगा 27,232, 18,594, 9,523. नाउ अगर आप कंपेयर करेंगे, इफ यू कंपेयर दीज वैल्यूज, लेट्स डू दैट. एक्चुअली इसके कंपैरिजन करते हैं हम. उसके लिए बेस्ट इज फर्स्ट टू break up the equated annual installment into principal and interest. इसको हम ब्रेकअप करेंगे बिटवीन प्रिंसिपल एंड इंटरेस्ट. So if I put my principal and interest here, principal interest you know already, interest यहां से आ जाएगा, करेक्ट. तो प्रिंसिपल वैल्यू विल बी $10,000 माइनस इंटरेस्ट. तो ये आपके प्रिंसिपल और इंटरेस्ट की वैल्यूज हो गई. ठीक है ना. This part. Now, if you see the actual asset balances क्या हैं between, हमारे actual asset balances हैं 26,594, 17,729, 8,864 and then 0. But what we are showing in operating lease, we are showing these balances which is exactly as per the lease liability. तो जो difference है वो क्या है? What is that difference? We are showing the asset at this value, but the asset should be at this value. So what is that difference? Do you know? Can you identify the difference? Batao. So here, if you see, I am showing the asset value as the same as my lease liability. Why is that?
As you have mentioned in the last class, they have US GAAP follows more conservative approach. So maybe because of that, because values in the ROU is less than in the lease liability.
Value in ROU. See, basically, what they will do in lease liability, the same thing they are reflecting in operating lease also. The very much same thing, right? बट अगर आप एक्चुअली आरओयू एसेट के वैल्यूज को कंपेयर करोगे तो वो डिफरेंट है, राइट. तो मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि ऐसा क्यों है? दैट इज द पॉइंट. व्हाई इज देयर अ डिफरेंस? बहुत सिंपल सी बात है, ये देखो. अगर मैं, प्लीज लुक हियर, फ्रॉम माय आरओयू एसेट वैल्यू, अगर मैं सिर्फ प्रिंसिपल पेमेंट को माइनस करता हूं फर्स्ट ईयर में, तो कितनी वैल्यू आनी चाहिए? 2723.248. ये वही वैल्यू है यहाँ पे जो है.
Yes, sir. Yes.
नाउ फ्रॉम दिस अगेन आई विल रिड्यूस द प्रिंसिपल रीपेमेंट. क्या वैल्यू आनी चाहिए? जो यही वैल्यू है 18,594. अगर मैं इससे फिर से प्रिंसिपल पेमेंट रिड्यूस करता हूं तो क्या वैल्यू आनी चाहिए? 9523. ये वही वैल्यू है जो यहाँ है. एंड यहाँ पे अगेन इफ आई रिड्यूस द प्रिंसिपल पेमेंट तो क्या वैल्यू आएगी? जी, जो वही वैल्यू यहाँ पे भी है. So basically what we are trying to do here is we are just reducing the ROU asset also by the principal amount. So the lease liability and ROU asset schedule will be exactly similar in operating lease. Okay, that is the point. Now finance lease में क्या cost P&L में जाएगा बताओ? What in the finance lease, what cost is going to go to the P&L? इंटरेस्ट जाएगा जो हमने यहां से लिया. द सेम, दीज आर द वैल्यूज. ये देखो 1773, 1362, 930, 476. उसके अलावा डेप्रिसिएशन जाएगा जो मैंने यहां से लिया. सो फाइनेंस लीज में ये दोनों जाएंगे टू द P&L. So if you take the sum total of this, what is the sum total of this? Sum total of interest is how much? 4540, and for amortization is depreciation is 35459. अगर मैं इन दोनों का टोटल लेता हूं तो कितना आता है? 4540 प्लस 35459, 40,000 एग्जैक्ट आएगा. Just that 40,000 cost is divided between interest and depreciation in finance lease. ऑपरेटिंग लीज में सिर्फ एक ही कॉस्ट जाएगा पीएनएल में, और वो है लीज रेंटल. 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. So this also will add up to 40,000. तो बेसिकली क्या मतलब हुआ कि whether it is finance lease or operating lease, we are transferring the same amount to the P&L. Just the manner of transfer is different. In finance lease, you are transferring you are transferring interest and depreciation costs separately. But in operating lease, you are transferring the entire cost as lease rental payment. But दोनों में 40,000 का ही outflow है. Are you getting it? Any कोई भी method use करो, it will be same. Yes, 100%. Because even the depreciation remains the same. Okay. So now what were the learning lessons from this? If we were to summarize some of the learning lessons, in IFRS, there is this both ROU and lease liability. There is the same treatment between for operating lease and finance lease. For US GAAP, the finance lease treatment will be similar to that of IFRS, but the operating lease will be different. But the lease liability schedule will exactly match the ROU schedule in operating lease as per US GAAP. And only the principal amounts would be reduced. That is the point. Same aega. Okay. So that's it for finance and operating lease.